it is no secret anymore that the Lich King was a failed project of Zobal's, and in fact it proved to be more of a headache than an actual ally that was supposed to just do his bidding. Previously, we've had some hints and bits and pieces and speculations, but with the recent Sylvanas novel, more was uncovered and we got some information on the roles of all three Lich Kings, Ner'zhul, ARTHAS, and Bolvar, and their relationship with the Jailer. And yeah, long story short, they didn't exactly plan on doing the Jailer's bidding and were doing their own thing pretty much. So how did the Lich Kings rebel against Zobal, and what were their actual goals? You must have wiped out a million times in your WoW years, but you probably didn't have Squad OV with you. And this is an app that records your instances automatically, and you can see your complete performance from spell visualizations to death recaps, and best of all, it is free. You don't have to do anything but install it, and you can share yours and watch your friend's perspective. So use my link in the description and check out Squad OV. So to start off, the lore is super vague, but if you're watching Shadowlands lore videos, this is like the name of the game. We have multiple sources in regards to the relationship of the Lich King and the Jailer, in-game ones, books, and interviews, and they all tell a similar story, so we really can extrapolate something from all these sources. Now, to be clear, we can definitely split all three Lich Kings into their own goals, purposes, as they were vastly different, and as we learned, none of them were actually pawns or anything akin to who was just straight out dominated directly. If you remember, when we first saw the Anduin model, we thought he would become the new Lich King, but from the lore now, we see that the Lich King was actually a lot more free than Anduin, who was just straight out just taken over. So the Lich King, as we learned, served two purposes. One is to potentially get Zobal into Azeroth. I'm guessing he changed his plans later on. And the second was to create that giant drill in order to channel Azeroth World Soul power into Zereth Mortis. Again, the Shadowlands pretty much ended, yet they never revealed so many parts of the story, so we still don't know what the Legion and the Jailer were working on exactly, but it is certain that the Lich King was a project of the two combined cosmological forces. Now, at the moment, things are leaning towards the Legion being manipulated to help in this regard, so they weren't really created as more like the Legion just provided the logistics for the Lich King. So, as you may know, Ner'zhul was the very first Lich King, and also, apparently the first time Zobal actually used domination magic in such a straightforward manner to project his own power onto another planet. Ner'zhul was an orc who was tortured by Kil'jaeden after the destruction of Draenor, and he was placed into that suit of armor to soften up the planet for a Legion invasion, but actually it was to give Jailer his own little army on our planet. Now, my guess right now is that Zobal originally intended to actually conquer Azeroth. He must have expected the Scourge to be able to win against all these armies. I mean, sure, he could just get the drill and get into Zereth Mortis, but wouldn't it be better if he just had his own army over the entire planet and he could just march into friendly territory? Well, as you know, that didn't really happen as he had anticipated and planned. Apparently, Zobal had some control over Ner'zhul, in fact more control over than any other Lich King, but it wasn't exactly just straight out mind domination where the Lich King was just fulfilling his every command. In an interview, Blizzard said that the Helm of Domination didn't actually offer him crazy powers because it was his first ever real go at projecting domination magic in such a big manner, so it was kind of an attempting where it was like half working. Short story also indicates that the Jailer's influence is more akin to like a seductive suggestion than outright domination, which turned out to not work out at all on all the Lich Kings. In Jailer's own words, Ner'zhul's mind was far too broken to be of any use to him, and this here can really lead us into two possible scenarios. Either due to his mind being too broken, Jailer couldn't really do much to Ner'zhul, or he realized Ner'zhul was useless, so he might have instructed Ner'zhul to find ARTHAS and to just get someone else to be a Lich King, someone like with an actual brain that could do his bidding. Of course, this isn't confirmed, but the official story is that Ner'zhul acted on his own will and was apparently doing his own thing, and he was the one that manipulated ARTHAS so that he can actually break free himself. However, he unfortunately for himself failed, and he was pretty much eaten by ARTHAS, like soul eaten. ARTHAS took over and Ner'zhul was no more. He somehow turned up in the mall, probably through the Kyrian, and as you saw how that ended, Zobal just turned him into a mindless weapon. Now comes in the true and the biggest thorn in the Jailer side, and that is ARTHAS. Now, ARTHAS was the Lich King, and a guy that built a ragtag undead army into nearly a superpower that posed a serious threat to the entirety of Azeroth. Previously, we believed that ARTHAS was a pawn akin to Anduin, but it turns out he pretty much entirely just did his own thing. He decided to screw over both the Legion and the Jailer, and he just built his own undead super empire. Now, in the Sylvanas novel, when she asked him about ARTHAS, that is exactly what the Jailer told her. It is entirely possible that he could have lied here, because why would she join Zobal if he tells her that he was like the actual guy behind all her suffering? However, I think this might actually just be like a half-truth. See, it was revealed to us that the more power used to the Helm Domination, the stronger the will of the Jailer, which is how Bolvar stayed independent. He just didn't use it and just stayed on the edges of the power. However, ARTHAS instead just utilized it to the fullest extent, yet he still remained independent. I'd say that is quite impressive. My thoughts are that he might have done some things for Zobal, such as building that forge, if that really was him, but he more than obviously didn't want to go on with his plans, didn't want to just serve him. Instead, ARTHAS decided to build his own army, and almost certainly his goal was to get the Undead Scourge to be the strongest force on Azeroth, so that he can resist both the Legion and the Jailer, and he was pretty successful as he did drive off the Legion and resisted the Jailer. However, ultimately, it was us that defeated him. Now, as ARTHAS used the helm to the fullest extent, he knew the Jailer's powers were strong, so he went on to make himself even stronger, build crazy monstrosities, resurrected dragons, and even wanted to recruit us as Death Knights to fight for him, which, when you think about it, actually makes him smarter than Zobal, who just saw us as useless mortals. Like, ARTHAS actually realized our potential. However, when all of that failed, we got the entire father is it over, and then the Jailer decided he's going to have a little bit of revenge for ARTHAS delaying and messing up all of his plans. So he essentially turned him into a weapon and just destroyed his soul. Unfortunately for the Jailer, the headache continued even further. Instead of the crazy power-hungry Lich King and the brain-dead one, he got a cautious paladin whose sole purpose was literally just to defy him. Bolvar realized that if he used the helm, his mind could fall under the Jailer's influence, so he only used it just enough to maintain the Scourge and to neutralize the threat. Now, at this point, the Jailer got really pissed off, and he decided to just empower Sylvanas, create a brand new project, and just get rid of this Lich King one. Essentially, he built this soul engine and all that, and now he had these Lich Kings denying him access to it, so it took him like a decade to finally get rid of the Lich Kings. While this here is a bit vague, it is almost certain that this is the actual story, because Zobal tells us in-game personally that the Lich Kings were a failure. Also, he got more practice with domination magic, so instead of the entire seductive approach where he suggests, he decided he's just going to get mindless servants from this point forward. Like, it's just so much easier. So Zobal decided now with Anduin he's going to use the soul of ARTHAS, and he's going to bind him to fulfill his every wish, which Anduin did until we freed him quite recently. Ultimately, this is the reason why ARTHAS' soul ended as it did. The result was a failure, so he pretty much destroyed him, but he wasn't nearly as much of a headache as ARTHAS was, that decided that he's smarter than his own creator, and for that, he decided to not only turn him into a weapon for a future project, but to completely obliterate whatever remains of his soul, and then ultimately we got that little fade that we have seen in the cinematic. Again, all this story is kind of vague and through various sources, but I gotta admit, I do like it. It gives a lot more depth and importance to the Lich King, as previously many people hated what the Shadowlands did to Wrath of the Lich King and the old lore, and how everyone was just a pawn of the Jailer. Well, with the Lich King, it may not have actually been the case. Thank you for watching. Check out the actual features of the Dragonflight by clicking on the screen, and check out Doronsmovies Academy for videos on real-world history. See you next time.